Hello, nerds. Nerds for humanity. It's been a while since I've done a live stream interview, so I'm super excited to have Alana Rush join us. Welcome to the show, Alana. You are one of the few people who understands RCV, is an American, and has seen it conducted at the federal level in a real country. So we're delighted to have you.
Thanks so much, Tom. I am super excited to be here as a fellow nerd and certainly an election nerd. I'm stoked to talk to you about RCV.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about where you are now and how you ended up there, because clearly you've got an American accent, not a Irish one.
Yeah, absolutely. I am reporting live for Nerds for Humanity from Dublin, Ireland, where I have lived for the past 5 years and am half Irish. So my dad is Irish. We grew up spending summers and holidays here, but I grew up in the States. I moved here for reasons longer than this podcast needs during COVID. And since I've moved here, I've gotten quite involved in politics. I've always been an advocate of getting involved in your local community. And one of the avenues I've done that through here is by getting involved in a political party. We had a general election last November, so I got involved in campaigning. And here in Ireland, we use a version of RCV. So I've really been able to see that up close firsthand.
Love it. As serendipity has it, my mother is not Irish, but she lived in Dublin for about a year when she was like 18 or 19. So,
oh wow, cool.
That's
amazing. Have you been to visit here?
I have. I have been there once for a work summit. We had a previous company I worked at had some offices out there, and it was a wonderful trip. And I wish I had more time because I mainly saw the airport and some office buildings. I know there's more to it than that.
There is, and you now have an official invitation to come for an election field trip next time we have an election to see. We'll get into how it all works, but you should come and see it up close and personal.
When is the next? You guys just had a big one? When's the next one?
So the government, once a government is put in place, it has roughly 5 years to stay in place. So we could have another election if something were to cause the government coalition to fall apart. It could be as soon as the next couple of months, but more than likely it'll be kind of 3.5 or 4 years from now.
Awesome. Well, I hope the government doesn't fall apart, but if it does, I'll be there. All right. So tell us a little bit more from an American's point of view, what it was like. Were you already familiar with RCV before you moved to Ireland?
No, I really, for someone who has spent a lot of time here, and I really had an admittedly limited understanding of how the political system worked. Probably the closest I got to really understanding how this country or a European system worked, and I'll admit this, it's nearly embarrassing given that I have citizenship here, was by watching the Netflix show Borgen, which takes place in, I think, Denmark, but they have a similar system, and there's coalition building and different parties working together behind the scenes, which is very different from an American system where you elect someone or you don't. Whoever gets elected is in power. So yeah, I would say I had a pretty limited kind of understanding before starting to pay attention when elections were happening around me.
So tell me about the first RCV election that you were able to participate in, and was that any different than, a classic American presidential or Senate election?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few things about the Irish system which are much different, kind of starting from the top down. So in Ireland, the country is broken up into constituencies that each elect, we call them TDs, but we'll call them senators for the purpose of this conversation. And every constituency has multiple senators. So between 3 and 5, depending on the population of the constituency.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is that basically every senator is meant to represent a roughly equivalent number of people.
Okay.
So if my constituency has 100,000 people, we have about 4 senators.
Okay. So almost like how we do congressional representatives.
Exactly.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And each constituency elects those 3 to 5 people, and you get a ballot that has all of the candidates running, and then you rank them, and you can vote for as many or as few as you want,
Mm-hmm.
and you put them in your order of preference. So instead of just voting for one person for one seat, you can vote for 5 or 10 or 1 or 2 people for the 4 seats that your constituency elects.
Okay, so let's explain to folks who might be stumbling upon this video in the future, who don't really, this might be one of the first times they've been introduced to ranked choice voting.
Mhm.
Why would one rank voters? Like, why is a system where you rank voters different or better than the way we do it here, where it's like you vote for one senator, that's your pick, or one congressperson, that's your pick. Whoever gets the most wins. Like, what's the advantage the way you guys do it?
Yeah, well, kind of going back, the reason why Ireland put this system in place, and the Irish state as it exists currently was established in 1922. And this system was the one that they chose when the state was established. So it's been around and functioning for over 100 years. I think often when people think about this kind of system, they're like, oh, like, will it work? Won't it work? Are there examples? Like, we've been doing it for a century and it's been working pretty well. And part of the reason why I understand that it was chosen is because it tends to protect a minority voice. And it avoids a winner-take-all kind of system. So there's room for candidates that would kind of exist across a broader spectrum. And my personal experience is that, when I went into the ballot box for the first time, there were candidates from, I think, 9 different parties. And obviously, some of the parties are national and they have bigger support. However, there's room for smaller parties. There's room for shades of differentiation among the left or the right or the center in a way that I had never been exposed to voting in the US, where it really was, I had Republican or Democratic options.
Yeah. And so how does ranked choice voting address or reduce the winner take all outcomes?
Well, I think that really comes into play where in a constituency, you're electing multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was first voting, when I was, I think my first presidential election, I think I was 20. And when I was voting for Congress, like, you vote for your one elected representative, or even like in mayoral elections, you kind of have one shot. Here, I have 4 senators who represent me. And so I can vote in a way that represents who I think would be the most closely aligned with me, the kind of second most closely aligned, and down the spectrum. And now that those people are in the seat, there's 4 people who come from, in my instance, 3 different parties. So when I have constituent issues where there are things I want to talk about or bring to their attention, I know that I can go to the guy from the really far left party if it's something that I think he's going to care about the most. So it's the fact that you have representation by multiple people kind of diversifies the system, I find, as a voter.
Yeah, yeah. You're so it would be the equivalent of a given congressional district having multiple congressional representatives per district.
Yeah.
Yes. And then this, so like we just had one in 24 for our for my congressional district. And we elected one person. There were a lot of other people running. And for sure, if I were able to have a slate of 4, let's say,
Hmm.
there would have been a lot more perspectives represented.
Hmm.
Because like maybe voters are these multi hyphenate kind of interest people that it's not like, oh, I just care about one topic and I'm going to vote for the best person for that topic. Yeah, that's super cool. Now, I'm guessing some people listening to this may be wondering, like, well, does that introduce
Right.
bureaucracy or like inability to make hard calls? Because now it's like committee decision making. What's your read on that?
So I think that that comes back to like we have a Senate that's elected and it makes decisions the same way that, or in a similar manner that many other senates or parliaments around the world would make decisions. There are committees and subcommittees. Parties tend to vote in a certain way when there are bills or laws up for voting. I think that the big key is that when you have a system that allows people to vote in a more representative way, it makes room for more parties,
Mm-hmm.
which makes room for more diversity of opinion within a governing body. So like right now in the US, things really tend to fall to party lines.
Yeah.
And there might be diversity of thought or beliefs within the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I think, we see that all the time. But when it comes to putting policy in place, those policy focused votes really tend to fall pretty typically on party lines.
Mm-hmm.
Here, when you have more parties, um, there's just a little more, I find, like responsibility back to the population and
Yeah.
accountability.
That's super interesting. I'm guessing then, have you observed that there's less kind of the pendulum swinging wildly every 4 years? Because
Hmm.
what we see here, as you probably know, is one party wins. It's either a blue wave or a red wave. They undo everything the last administration did. They overcorrect. And then 4 years later, the same thing happens again. Seems like if the Irish system has kind of built in diversity of perspectives, then it's harder to go hardcore way off in one fringe direction.
Exactly. And like the way that things are structured here, you end up with a government that is
Mhm.
some majority coalition of either a party or multiple parties. Um, for example, in the last government before the current one, there were two major parties. We have three that would be kind of major parties, and one minor party,
Mhm.
the Green Party, which would be a very environmentally focused party in power. And so you had both a minority party as part of government, but then the way the system is set up, you also always have opposition, which is any party that's not currently in government. And opposition plays an important role in balancing out government. There's always the chance that opposition parties are going to get into power the next time. So I find that, like, because everybody understands that there's a little bit that things could change and coalitions could change, and there's none of that kind of pendulum majority swing.
Mhm.
Um, I find that it's obviously politics can be a little bit contentious, but I find it to be a little bit more collaborative than what I've observed in an American system.
Yeah. And what about the campaigns? Here, if you kind of demonize or you say the other side is un-American or anti-American and they're just beneath contempt, it can be a winning strategy for a American politician. What's the vibe like with campaigns in Ireland given the RCV kind of dynamics?
Do you know what, Tom? I'm so glad you asked that question, because that, I think, is one of the most incredible advantages of this system that I observed. So in November, we had a general election where we were electing all of the senators. So I volunteered on a campaign, and we were canvassing from August through November. And that meant that there's a practice of going door to door, knocking on people's doors, having conversations. Voters expect you to come to their door. So you'll often get to someone's door and they'll have a little Post-it with their questions on the door.
Oh, wow.
All of the politicians canvass, from, our equivalent of a prime minister called the Taoiseach, all the way down to new candidates. Everyone is out knocking on doors. So, the most senior politician could be knocking on your door on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So when out canvassing, what you would find is that someone might say, we'd knock on a door and someone would say to us, I'm already voting. My first preference is going to this particular candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even if that candidate is on the polar opposite end of the spectrum from the candidate I'm working with, we don't consider that to be a closed door.
Mm.
We say, oh, that's so interesting. What are the issues that you care the most about? And they might say this, that, or the other. And then we could get into a conversation. We might end the conversation by saying, we'd love your second preference.
Mm.
So you get that, where you say, instead of immediately demonizing any candidate, you always know that there's a second preference up for grabs, which means that either, and I guess maybe an important question, why is that important? Why does the second preference matter? Why does the number 2 vote matter? If a candidate is either not that popular, so in this instance, like I knock on a lady's door, she's got her first vote tied up, and let's say it's a small party and that candidate doesn't get that many votes. In a representative system like ours, that means that if her candidate is eliminated, now all of those votes get redistributed to the number 2. So if she votes for the candidate I'm supporting for number 2, great, we've just picked up a vote. On the other side of things, let's say she's voting for the most popular candidate. In our system, if she votes for the most popular candidate, once that person crosses a threshold and gets their seat and secures it, the surplus of those votes gets redistributed. So now we have another opportunity. Now we have a different version of an opportunity to pick up that vote.
I love that.
So it's like, it kind of incentivizes people to be open to talking to someone and finding out what they care about, rather than focusing on demonizing someone else.
Yeah. And so in those examples, if you're trying to be their number 2 candidate, bashing their first choice and saying that they're a threat to democracy or like anti-American and they hate America, like that's not going to win you second choice votes.
Absolutely not. That's going to get a door slammed in your face.
Yeah. Fascinating. And so does that actually play out? Like I can see how that works in theory, but do you see less of the ad hominem kind of like scorched earth campaigning?
Absolutely. I mean, there's, politics is, I think, anywhere in the world always going to have some, kind of sharp elbows. But as someone who's been involved in campaigns in now these 2 different countries, like much less of that took place here. There's also the party that I am affiliated with is kind of a center left party and a smaller party. And there is, you would hear candidates say, vote left, transfer left. And that sentiment means vote for the candidate that you support and then make sure you're also ranking other candidates that are from parties that have similar alignment so that the transfers are meaningful. So there's some really interesting kind of like behind the scenes, very unofficial support that you certainly wouldn't see in, you hardly have a Republican being, saying, vote for the other guy too. Right?
Yeah, that would be very rare.
Or a Democrat. Like, in the US system, you'd have exactly what you brought up, more of that demonizing than finding common ground.
What about like after these folks show up in the legislative branch and are doing their jobs, do you see any impact around doing really big, hard things? So as an example, I think everyone in the US agrees that the current immigration system is broken. The current healthcare system is broken. Our entitlement systems are broken. Like there's a lot of complex stuff. And many people are pessimistic that Congress will get anything done because I think the hypothesis is that, well, you're going to get primaried if you try and propose something that kind of works for more people, because your district isn't representative of most people. It's generally going to be super red or super blue. Do you see any impact of RCV on Ireland kind of going after really hard, complex issues and getting stuff done?
Yes and no. I mean, like, I would love to be able to say, oh my God, yes. And then once people get elected, there's like all this collaboration together so well. Typically, parties in government, so if there's a coalition in government together, those parties will collaborate pretty well together. One of my like personal critiques of the political system as it is that the folks in opposition tend to try to like the practice is to kind of find fault with anything that government does. I understand that, right? Like you want to show that these guys aren't doing their jobs, that you can get elected the next time and have a better way of doing it. I think there could be a little bit more like, let's find the good in what they're doing as well and kind of all try to work together. But I think that what does happen is that, again, because you have multiple parties and you have opposition and government that all kind of have a seat at the table, what you do end up with is kind of a holding to account in what I think is a meaningful way. There's also, and what that ends up looking like is journalists asking tough questions and bringing on two different perspectives, like people speaking up and getting involved, protests and demonstrations. Like there's a lot of examples of what I would call like holding to account that I do think then ends up impacting government.
Yeah. It sounds like, are your equivalent of congressional districts, I think you call them constituencies. It sounds like are they more mixed or in terms of like diversity of political opinions, or are they similarly like sometimes people complain about gerrymandering, which is a big problem. There's also like self kind of selection where people of a particular political belief like tend to congregate in certain areas. And that results in, with our party system in the US, that, well, you can kind of vote against the country's interests, and so long as you're towing the party line, like your political career is safe for re-election. Do you see more like accountability over there, like, or do you have similar issues?
So I think the way that our constituencies are mapped is typically to like county lines, and counties in Ireland would be kind of the most similar to states in the US. If a county is big or small, they'll get lumped together or split. There's some kind of electioneering, map drawing that does take place. It's nowhere near the US in terms of gerrymandering, just because the boundaries are kind of often already roughly drawn. Because of that too, you tend to have certainly economic diversity within a county or within a constituency. There do tend to be areas that are more aligned with one political party or tradition than another. But I think the biggest factor that that differentiates it is that, like, there's a lot more like local accountability. Like, think one congressperson represents between 20 and 30,000 people at most anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a, like, you can call up their office and get through to someone, and they live in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And they go to the school and the coffee shop and the church, and, like, it feels much more like local politics in the US in that way.
They don't all move to Dublin, or like we have folks in DC?
No. So, Ireland is about the same size as Indiana.
Okay.
The whole country.
Yeah.
So they tend to, if you don't live in Dublin, if you're not representing an area around Dublin, you tend to come up from like Tuesday to Thursday. And the days that the Senate is in session are essentially like Tuesday to Thursday. And then Monday and Friday are back in your home office, like in the constituency.
So what do they do for housing on Tuesday and Thursday? They have to get a second house or something, or
they have if you're not from within the capital region, you have like an allowance for housing. They typically will stay in like the same hotel that's near the government buildings. So you have like essentially like a housing and transport allowance.
Yeah, I don't think we do that here. And it results in people serving in Congress who either have means to have a second place, and DC is not a cheap place to live.
No.
Or they're forced to, find other sources of income to kind of supplement it, which creates all kinds of weird incentives. Let's talk a little bit about, you said Ireland's been doing this since 1920. So here in the US, there are more people than not still are learning about RCV. And it's sort of like trying to explain cryptocurrency to people. They're like, what is this weird thing? Like, that's crazy. That'll never work.
Yeah.
The ballots are too complicated. Like it's people are going to get confused. What's been your observation on, like, does RCV in implementation actually work and scale?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has been working at scale for 100 years here. So I think yes. And it essentially means that, like, the process of counting can go through multiple rounds, right? Like, part of the reason why you rank candidates is so that, there's different ways of figuring out at what point you eliminate one candidate and redistribute their votes based on the ranking. And I think, like, Maine and Alaska have systems where it's only if someone's eliminated. But anyway, so because of that, you have to go through these multiple rounds. Okay, we've done the first count. Now this person either has gotten a seat or has gotten eliminated. Now what do we do with their votes? We redistribute them. But it's a pretty straightforward process. I had friends visiting recently from the States, and I was talking about this with them, and they were like, oh yeah, we use that. The husband is the dean of students at a school in Pennsylvania. And he's like, oh, that's the system we use for our student council elections. I was like, oh yeah. Okay, you guys do it at a school. We do it for the whole country.
Yeah. Yeah, that is funny. a lot of people would say, wow, look, it takes too long to get the results.
Mm-hmm.
That can you imagine what a headache it would be to do recounts and ballot kind of counting errors and things like that. But it does seem like you all, like, do you have to wait weeks for the results of an election? Like, when, how does that work?
Yeah, so our election was on a Friday, and by I think it was Monday, I believe it was by Monday, all of the senators had been elected. The fastest one came in by the evening on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Took about 9 hours to do the full count, and it went through, I think, 7 or 8 rounds of redistributions to get the 4 senators elected. But yeah, most are done within 48 hours.
And do you use Dominion machines? Like, is that automated? How do you do it so
No,
fast?
it's a very manual process. And one of my observations was like a computer could probably do this in 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take it with a grain of salt. But essentially, I, as a voter, go into my polling station. I'm given a paper ballot and I rank with numbers my
Mm-hmm.
candidates, 1 through 11 or 17 or 5 or however many. The next day, and I put my ballot into a box.
Mm-hmm.
And the box is based on where my physical address, and it has a certain number of voters who go into that box. The next day, all of those boxes are brought to a school gymnasium or an arena, some sort of like public place that's been designated the counting center for that constituency. And a team of about 100 to 200 campaign or election workers sit and count the votes.
Mm.
And there's a very specific process on the timing and how they do it. And there's observers from all of the campaign teams
Mm-hmm.
who stand next to them and watch the tally as it takes place. They can call into question any, like if I see somebody who miscounts or misreads a ballot, or there's a confusing ballot, I can like raise my hand as a volunteer and ask them to review that. There's systems in place to weigh the batches of 100 ballots so that no ballots go missing. So there's all of these kind of like very tried and true processes in place to make sure that it's a very fair, observed counting process. And that takes place all over the country in every constituency. And then the results get reported back. And the national broadcast, our equivalent of like PBS, keeps a live tracker online and on TV, and the ballots eventually come in pretty quickly.
So you're not defunding your equivalent of PBS?
No.
Tell me a little bit about the downsides. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of advantages to ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect. What are the kind of trade-offs, especially if the US were to adopt it more thoroughly?
Yeah. I think like I certainly find it to be a system that I think, it takes a little more time and effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like certainly the counting process can involve multiple rounds of counting and redistributions, and recounts happen, and you have to factor that in terms of getting results. And you can end up with many candidates and kind of like fringe candidates included. I don't think that's necessarily a negative.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to the voters to differentiate between the many candidates on the ballots. So I kind of struggle to find real downsides with putting a system in place that allows people to express what I believe is more of like their voter DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I think what ends up happening is instead of the party being primary or the candidate being the primary driver of who you're voting for, you can kind of vote on the issues that matter most to you. If I
Yeah.
really care about housing, I can find the candidate who's most aligned with my housing policy beliefs and put them as number one. Then, for me, immigration is maybe important. So I find a candidate who
Yeah.
aligns with that issue and they're my number two.
Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like you're able to express your voice in a more fulsome way than just
Mhm.
picking one. One criticism I've heard of opponents to RCV in America is voters will not understand how to rank, that it's hard enough to get people to participate in
Yeah.
elections when they just pick one.
Yeah.
They may not have even heard of more than a few candidates.
Yeah.
What's your observation on that?
I mean, I think the introduction of something like this there would probably be a friction period, right?
Mhm.
Like anytime, you change the packaging on some famous thing and people get upset about it and they, kind
Yeah.
of like their change is hard, right? But I do think that it kind of fundamentally, once it's been explained to you once or twice, it's the idea of put in order the people that you want to vote for in a ranked order. It's something that we do all the time. We're always kind of making ranked choice
Mhm.
decisions. So I think the concept isn't that far outside of our realm of comprehension.
Mhm.
And so if you kind of commit to the first time we do it, there's going to need to be some explaining. That piece, I think, is a hurdle that can be overcome. Also, the other reality is you're not required to rank everyone.
Mhm.
You can vote for only one person. If you just like one candidate, just put one, and that's it. So it doesn't require people to have a knowledge of every single candidate. You could walk in knowing I like the Republican candidate. I'm just voting for that person. Great. That's your prerogative.
Yeah. I'm gonna hit some questions in the chat. So if folks watching live,
Yeah.
there's actually 52 people watching us live right now. Go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll ask Alana, and then Alana, I wanted to kind of zoom out
Yeah.
and just hear from you, since we're talking, what is the perspective of what's going on in the US and the US's role in the world? What do people in Ireland think? Or what are some of the common things that you're hearing on the street and with friends? But before we'll wrap up the RCV stuff with a couple of questions from the chat. So
Great.
we have Vaughn, who's a longtime viewer of Nerds for Humanity. He wants to know, so is there a negative result of politicians who fail to knock on doors? You kind of described, it sounded to me like a New Hampshire primary where there's a lot of retail politics going on. What if a politician doesn't do that, but they have massive amounts of TV and direct mail and kind of paid media?
Yeah. So great question. First of all, there is not TV media. There's
Oh,
no TV campaigning. There's also really strict limits on how much a candidate can spend on their campaign. There's
wow.
an upper cap of in the realm of call it $40,000 to $50,000
Total?
total. Yep.
Okay, that's a little less than what we typically see spent
Yeah.
here. So it's not
And
legal. I guess you wouldn't even be able to afford national big TV spots then.
yeah, and you would people put up election posters. There's a weird
Okay.
there's a tradition of postering. So you can
Yeah.
spend money on posters. You would get TV coverage by being on the debate shows, or you kind of
Uh-huh.
get coverage, but
You
there's
can't buy
definitely
it.
you can't really buy it. Yeah.
Hmm.
which is different.
So therefore, you kind of have to knock on doors. That's like one of the ways to reach these voters.
One of the ways, yeah. And if you're incumbent, and the last time people saw you was at the last election, you definitely hear from a lot of people, well, no one's been around here since the election.
Oh, yeah.
There are a lot of sitting politicians who, on that Friday when they're not in the Senate, they're out knocking on doors. Or, once a month they are out, they have community. So like there is kind of an expectation that you're out in the community, you're knocking on doors, you're making yourself seen and available.
Yeah. Wow. That's so fascinating. Yeah. So you can't buy scaled media to influence opinions. You've got to do the kind of shoe leather approach, and that's like host like town halls and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have town halls. Like I really would like, if people are election nerds, like put this on your radar, because it's kind of like the West Wing, New Hampshire campaign days meets like the Gilmore Girls. Kind of like what you feel like you're in the middle of.
That sounds pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. I will say, in my time in January of 24, working on a presidential primary campaign in New Hampshire, it was pretty inspiring to see regular people come out to the town halls and ask hard questions. And, you kind of felt like they were shopping cars, like test driving cars. And yeah, it's just, I think it forces the candidates to kind of be on their toes a little more too, because it's not all like this perfectly crafted narrative that you cut into a 30-second TV spot kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's too, like, the number of people who were still deciding the weeks before the election was really high. And I think that's because you have that ranked choice. It's like someone isn't fully committed once they've decided their first, and the second is still really important. So people are still up for grabs in a way that requires you to care about what they care about and communicate about issues, not just negative things about the other parties.
Yeah. And does Ireland also have party primaries in advance of the general election? Like, how does that work?
Every party has a candidate selection process.
Okay.
They tend to only be eligible to party members, and party membership here would typically be like a notional fee. But you have to be a member for at least 12 months to vote on the equivalent of a party primary. So it tends to be kind of more of a closed door operation. It's certainly less of a public race than in the US.
Okay. So they do not use ranked choice. The parties don't use RCV to pick their nominee. That's done through what, party leadership or
party leadership? Or like, there would be well, because folks are run at the constituency level, like the branch of a party in a constituency would typically be responsible for nominating somebody, and then the overall party typically approves the nominee or goes through some sort of selection process.
Okay. So
it'd kind of be like if I was in, San Francisco and I was running the Democratic branch in San Francisco, we would say, we think Tom should be running for Congress. And then the National Democratic Party would go, okay, Tom's the candidate. Let's review him and make sure he's, in good standing. And we put our rubber stamp on that, and he's now the candidate.
Okay. That's also saying that the registered Democratic Party voters in my district would not vote for me to be the nominee.
Yeah. So there's one difference. So like when I register to vote here, I'm just registered to vote. I don't have a party affiliation as a voter, but I chose to join a political party.
Right.
I paid 20 euros and I, said, no, I'm not a member of any other party, and I believe in these values. And that gives me the access to vote on the equivalent of the primary at that level.
Okay. Interesting. So you mentioned, like in your example, the leadership may nominate me and then the national leadership kind of approves it. There's also a step where people who are formal members of that party in the district also have to approve it.
Yeah, and it differs from party to party but like each party is responsible for running a process to select their candidates that could include the membership voting. It could include the party leadership making those decisions. It's really up to the parties to put candidates forward that they believe represent their party properly.
Love it. We have a couple more chat comments. So Philip is just providing some information. The system's called proportional RCV. And I love the idea that if there are 4 spots and the person who's like the most popular easily locks in the spot, that their surplus votes get redistributed. So the will of the majority of the district is more reflective of the whole thing versus all being kind of almost wasted on that top one. Because then right now, I think without that, you end up doing some strategic voting where you're like, well, I'm not going to vote for the number 1 guy because I know he's going to win. Yeah. Interesting. Pat has a question for you. What is the season? We have continuous campaigning here and continuous fundraising. What's it like over there?
So a government, let's say nothing falls apart or causes a government to collapse before its time, it's typically in place for 4 to 5 years. The election season or the campaign season is technically only, I think it's at least 3 weeks and no more than 5 weeks. That's not exactly right, but it's directionally accurate. So the sitting Taoiseach or prime minister will dissolve the government and say, in 3 weeks' time, we're having an election. All of you sitting senators are no longer sitting senators. Everyone go run for election or re-election. And the day that the Senate is dissolved is the first day that election posters can go up, that any campaign material can be put out. So our campaign seasons are only 3 weeks long, which is so different than in the US, we are inundated for 2 years leading up to the presidential election.
Now, you don't hear complaints around this more constrained election cycle along the lines of freedom of expression, that people would say, hey, I have a right to pay for ads to support my candidate anytime I want. And, the government shouldn't tell me when I can talk about certain things versus others.
So you don't have candidates paying for ads, first of all. Like, that's just not part of the mix. And candidates know that an election is coming up, right? Like, I was part of a campaign team that was out knocking on doors from August, and the election wasn't held until the end of November.
Right.
But from August until the beginning of November, we were just out there having discussions with people in the community.
Yeah.
Ahead of an upcoming general election, we want to find out, Tom, what do you care the most about? Oh, that's so interesting. This candidate that I'm campaigning for actually also cares about that issue. Do you want to chat with him? He's right here.
Yeah.
So it's, but it's, you can get out in the community and make a name for yourself, but you're not buying campaign time. And also, like, the Irish population, I think, would be up in arms if you tried to tell them, like, you're going to have 2 months of campaign posters everywhere. Absolutely not, Yeah.
So it's so interesting. I think congressional representatives spend maybe 20-30% of their week in between elections fundraising. To be able to buy the media. And in your case, it sounds like the Irish politicians spend 20 or 30% of their time knocking on doors and engaging with constituents,
Yeah.
even if the constituents don't have a lot of money to donate, because they don't have anywhere, they're not allowed to spend it on TV and radio anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
the maximum that any individual or company, I believe, can donate in a given year is about $1,500. Like, again, I don't know if
Yeah.
that might not be a precisely accurate number, but it's within that like realm of so you're not making $1 million contributions. You're not
Yeah.
trying to jump from somebody, it's pretty low. And again, like a candidate can really only spend, 30 to 50,000 on a whole campaign. So
Yeah, that's crazy. So you don't have like political action committees with unlimited donations. Yeah. So you wouldn't have Elon giving 200 million to Trump in
no, he could give $1,500. That's it.
It's so crazy. It's like an alternate universe. Sounds like there's a ton of parties. You don't just have the two.
Yeah, we have three parties that would typically poll at above 20%. Like currently two of them are in a coalition in government together, and one of them is the largest opposition party. And then there are, I would say, like four smaller parties. They tend to be on the left. And then there's a number of like independent or very tiny parties. The smaller parties would be kind of like 5 to 11% of popular support when polls are done. And then there's a handful of parties that would be like 1 to 2% or lower.
And it sounds like even those smaller parties, they have a shot of showing up in the legislature in a way that here, like we technically have, as you know, like a Libertarian Party, a Green Party, but you rarely see them show up in Congress. They run a lot, but they don't show up there. It sounds like here the barrier to entry is a little bit more accessible for a new party or a smaller party.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, you really never know what's going to happen once the election takes place, because depending on the numbers needed and the type of coalition that could take place, like a small party could choose to go into government with bigger parties, and now you've got a seat at the table. Sometimes that doesn't work out strategically. In the example I gave where the Green Party was a very small party compared to the other two bigger parties and they went into government, they kind of like became a little bit of a scapegoat. And then losing a lot of seats in this time around. But, you could also have a system where all of the smaller parties coalesce and they form a government because, you have 10 here, 12 there, 20 here, and now you've got a coalition of smaller parties. So it's kind of up for grabs, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I kind of feel like here you've got Coke and Pepsi and that's it, man.
Yeah.
Like,
but kind of like imagine, if, for example, you had Coke and Pepsi and then like two other smaller parties, right? Let's say you had maybe the Libertarians, maybe there's an offshoot of, maybe the Republican Party kind of splits off, maybe the Democratic Party splits off. And then you start to have a conversation about, okay, like who sits in power if we work together? And obviously that's a complete overhaul of the system, but it just opens some doors as to like what comes to the forefront when you remove just this very strict two-party system that doesn't really give either an alternative.
Yeah. I would love to see that world. I really hope we can, folks in the US will think more about alternative ways to do things. And certainly what I'm trying to do here in California is bring more RCV at the city and county level. and kind of go from bottoms up, because it's just hard to imagine the federal level doing much anytime soon. But this has been super educational. I can tell a lot of people are really interested in it. And thanks to, do you know Philip Clark? He seems to know a lot about Irish stuff. Maybe
No, but Philip,
yeah.
you're actually absolutely accurate. And so if you ever want to in Ireland and want to chat politics, sometimes let me know.
Yeah. Okay, let's zoom out for a second, and I'll let you go. Do you have a few more minutes before we
I
wrap?
do. Yeah.
Okay, so you're center left, I'm center left. So I'm guessing both of us definitely have our concerns about Trump, but I'd love to zoom out for a second and just give me a sense of how folks in Ireland see America today and our role in the world. I'm guessing like there must be some people that are supportive and some people who have concerns. Like, what are you hearing from your Irish neighbors and colleagues?
I get a lot of sympathy and a lot of people going like, what's happening over there? Um,
Mm,
I think it's kind of three sentiments. I think one is at a macro level, kind of like concern for global geopolitical stability. Like, what's going on? Kind of like what's happening, what's going to happen. And I think there's a little bit of fear around, uh, what I think seems to be like a little bit of a like, what's today going to look like? Um,
hmm
whether it's tariffs have a huge implication for the Irish economy. It's a little bit like what on earth is actually going on over there? That's a big question. Um, I think another piece is that like I've had conversations with people that have surprised me about how many people like are like, I just won't be going to the States anytime soon. I would have loved to go to New York. I'm going to wait till, a good maybe 3 to 4 years. Let's see. Um, there's also a little bit of fear around what I would call like routine travel, you know? Um,
hmm
uh, people are deleting their social media accounts before they get on a plane. Like they're nervous about taking a trip to New York and LA, from my neighbors who are a couple in their 60s who are just a normal couple going on a vacation. And they're like, do we have anything to be worried about? Is everything going to be okay? Like, we've cleaned our phones. We've got a burner phone for our holiday to the US.
Wow.
So there's like that level of
Yeah.
just kind of like, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, what country are people going to where they have to like wipe their phones and they've got burner phones? I'd be like, oh, like, a really
China.
politically insecure country or China
Yeah.
or like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I would have never said the US. So,
Yeah.
and then I just think the third thing is like, but that being said, I've had American friends visiting over the last, couple of months and like they expressed to me a concern about like, oh, are people going to be upset with us? Are people going to treat us badly? Like there's
Mm,
not a negative sentiment towards American people. There is, I think, a genuine concern about like America's role in destabilizing what's going on in the globe, especially since things are quite fraught.
yeah.
Anyway.
So definitely the tariff stuff. I had dinner with a former colleague who works for a big company overseas, and he was like, "Yeah, like it's going to impact the prices that they charge, American consumers for their products, and it's hard to know like what the actual tariff policy will be because it keeps getting
Yeah.
reassessed or paused or unpaused or raised and then dropped and blah blah blah." What about what's the take of Irish folks that you've encountered around American foreign policy, like Ukraine and Gaza and Iran? Are folks in agreement with our stance, or mad, or concerned, or What's
Yeah,
their
no, Ireland is one of the, I think, like within the EU, one of the most like pro-Palestinian countries, just in terms of, and for a number of reasons. There's a humanitarian reason, but there's also because of our history of colonization from the British, there is a sense of solidarity with the Palestinian people from, there are parallels drawn between Britain and Ireland and Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, I could see that. Mm-hmm.
And so that's one component. So it would be a very pro-Palestinian sentiment. You know, there's, and that translates to uh, a strong sentiment around like boycotting. But from an American standpoint, there are frequently calls to question why Ireland, as a neutral country, would allow U.S. Military to, basically, the U.S. military travels through Shannon Airport
Mm-hmm.
in Ireland. And there have been many calls to stop allowing that to happen. Basically, like, how are we as a country that broadly doesn't support this, and doesn't support Israel? We're kind of enabling that through allowing the U.S. military to pass through here. So that would be something that like people would be very aware of. There have been protests down at Shannon Airport. Yeah, and so like that's a point where like the U.S. and Ireland are not aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Especially from like a public, I think, sentiment.
What about Ukraine? President Trump's view is that if anybody's responsible for the war between Russia and Ukraine, it's the Biden administration. I think maybe he's also suggested the Obama administration. Like, what is the take of the the Irish folks that you've talked to? Like, what do they think is going on in Ukraine?
I don't know that, like, I mean, so Ireland opened its doors, like many European countries, to Ukrainians. We have many Ukrainian like refugees that are here.
Mm-hmm.
We created short pathways for them to be able to get the equivalent of a social security number and jobs more easily. And there are many support systems put in place. So it's a very pro-Ukrainian sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
I've not heard anyone kind of discuss America in the context of Ukraine. And I think it's Ukraine isn't a controversial topic here. It's like, oh, it's really bad that there's a war in Ukraine. We support the Ukrainian people both here and back at home. But America, I haven't personally heard that come up in conversation. Although, like, I do have, I might not have been plugged into that, but I think there's a general like sentiment that the U.S. is pretty closely aligned with Russia and like fueling that machine, especially from a Trump perspective. But
how do the Irish feel about some of their tax money going to providing military aid to Ukraine in what seems to be a very long war of attrition? That's the biggest criticism I've heard here in the States, that, hey, there's no way the Ukrainians are going to win. We keep providing more and more military aid. It's just never ending. Let's just cut our losses, and Ukraine should take whatever deal they can get.
I haven't heard that sentiment here. Also, probably important to note that Ireland is a neutral country militarily. So,
it's not part of NATO.
I don't know the answer to that question, but we essentially have like checks in place to be able to deploy military aid. It needs to be something that is backed by the UN and then different like governing bodies here. So
I just looked it up. You're right. I'm sorry. I assumed they were a part of NATO. It is a partner of NATO. It's not a member, and neutrality is almost like Switzerland kind of approach.
Yeah, exactly. And that may be going by the wayside based on some movement that the current government is making. But at this point, we are militarily neutral, but like very just pro-Ukrainian. There's kind of like no shades of that.
Yeah, that is and Emily, who's in the live chat, is joining us from Ukraine, and shared that there was a big attack. I mean, it's explosions every 2 to 3 minutes. I can't understand how folks don't think that the Russians are responsible for this violence. It's not like the Ukrainians are occupying like Moscow or something, or bombing.
Right.
Like this is just crazy. And I realize there have been some instances where Ukrainians kind of counterattacked, and I think that's their right when you're being invaded. But yeah, I mean, that's a long conversation. And so we talked about Gaza, and that is so interesting. Maybe especially when there was the blockade of aid, of food aid going into Gaza, I could see some historical comparisons being made for sure. Last question, and I'll let you go. One area which I think so far has gone better than expected. Oh, by the way, thank you, Emily, for becoming a new member, supporting the channel. That's so cool.
Emily,
you might be our first member from Ukraine. And I will keep Ukraine in my prayers, and I will advocate, Emily, to my congressional representative that we continue to
Nerds
support.
for
Tom. Yeah, we'll run for, maybe when we have ranked choice voting, I'll have a shot. I might be too centrist. So let me ask you about Iran, because I remember when we were ramping up to potential U.S. involvement in Iran, I was very much against it. I was like, man, I don't want to get dragged into another thing. What was the perspective from Ireland of the bombings of the nuclear kind of research sites and development sites?
I mean, I think that like right now, Iran is so tied up with the conflict between Israel and Palestine that I almost don't think it was viewed separately, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Meaning like, I think here especially there is at this point in the conflict such a strong like pro-Palestinian sentiment and a questioning of what kind of a perspective that like Israel is continuing to provoke violence in the region, that like I think that part can't be ignored in looking at like the US, Iran, Israel, right? Like it's all, I think, viewed as quite interconnected.
Okay, so the Irish, one of the predominant Irish views of this is that, well, this was Israel's beef with Iran, and the U.S. was kind of aiding that Israeli effort. And then it also sounds like, are you suggesting that the Israelis were not justified in launching the military attacks on Iran?
I don't know, like I don't know that it was like not justified. I think like I do think Ireland as a neutral country tends to lean into, we want to see stability and de-escalation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I also think like Ireland has come out and like criticized human rights violations in Iran. Like there's we would, I think, tend to say like we need to calm the temperature in the region. We need to de-escalate what's going on. Iran has a pretty horrendous track record of like human rights violations, but like that kind of tends to be the sentiment. And that's where I think like it's important to remember that Ireland is a neutral country.
Yeah.
And that I think comes to the forefront when, we tend to be like a diplomacy first. We're never going to be sending military into a direct conflict like that. So like we tend to say, okay, let's de-escalate whatever's happening. The Irish government would tend to take a look at like protecting its citizens. Like I think we got people out of our embassy in Iran. Like you'd see headlines about like we're making efforts to fly people home if they're there. Like those are kind of the stories around Iran, rather than like pointing fingers or figuring out if or how we would get involved from a military perspective.
Alana, it has been an absolute pleasure. And what I told you was going to be a 40-minute conversation took an hour and 10 minutes. But I think it went by really quickly. And I really appreciate you taking the time to help us in the U.S. just see a different perspective and how another country does things and operates its elections. It sounds like there's a lot to consider. Maybe we can't carbon copy it over here, but there's things that might work over there that could work over here and be helpful. So really appreciate you taking the time to do that, as well as kind of share the Irish general point of view on some things. And Philip seems to think that you got it right, that you described a lot of the opinions of, so your citizenship is well deserved. And yeah, I hope we'll have to get you back on in a few months. And with the way things are, like the world is changing very quickly, so there'll probably be other topics to talk about. And yeah, the idea of a field trip to observe an election in another country, I think I've never considered that, but I think it would be super interesting.
Tom, I think you'd really love it.
Yeah, I bet. All right, Alana, anything else that you want to share before I let you go?
No, just thank you so much for having me here as part of this conversation. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in now and in the future. And I will also just say I'm a citizen representing my own perspectives. I might not have said everything correctly, and I'm only representing my limited perspective of the people I come into contact with. So I wouldn't want anyone to take my perspective as gospel. But thank you so much for the conversation.
I love it. Hope you enjoy what remains of your weekend, and we'll see you in the future.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care. Bye. All right. That was fantastic. I'm going to give you some closing thoughts. Let me get the kind of going away music. Where's my going away music? Closing theme. Here we go. There we are. Hopefully you can still hear me and the music isn't messing with my voice. Okay, so before we do that, let's see. Yeah, hopefully this works. Okay, so before we do that, let me thank some of the people who make this channel possible, including Emily Quinn, who just became a member during the live stream. Always fun to see that happen. Hasn't happened in a while. Emily, you deserve a cowbell. Welcome, Emily. Welcome to the Nerds for Humanity. I feel like Emily, yeah, I think I remember you from early Yang Gang days. So you might be a new member, but you're not a new viewer. So that's awesome to see you back in the action. Oh, you have a question. Oh, Vaughn is saying that I should bring out the gong. All right, hold on a second. I gotta go. That's been a while since we've gonged it up. Oh, where the hell is it? Okay. I have the gong, but I don't have the little thing to hit the gong. So we're gonna have to try and just find any item that I like. This little, I don't even know what this thing does. It just holds like wires, but we'll see if the gong works. Yeah, kind of, actually. Yeah, baby. All right. So, channel members. Let's do it. Share screen. Where the hell are you guys? View members. See your members. There they are. Okay. Let's do this. God, it's been a while since I've done a live stream, guys, so you can tell. Okay, let's start with the highest level. We don't have any nerd Supreme Court justices, but we do have a nerd cabinet member, which is Soldier One, who has been a supporter of this channel for 5 years. Unbelievable. Thank you, Soldier One. Then we have members of the Nerd Congress, starting with our longest term member, Kristen Slevin, 66 months. Gosh, 5.5 years. Bike, and Zig PC, congressional members of the Nerds for Humanity delegation. Then we have our city council members, Gene, DK, Jackalego, Mr. History, Dean, Galessa, Jay Perrin, Brittany, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Jeremy, Mickey, Jackson, and Unkiyu. And then finally, we have our registered nerds. And I will scroll through those real quick so you can see all of them. There's a decent number. So thank you to all of you who make... There's Emily. Okay, if we go here, we say total time as member. Woohoo! Emily's our newest. Can you believe between Joseph Tramontano, who joined a year ago, we haven't had a new member since Emily. So that's awesome that we have, the drought has been broken. And you might be wondering, like, well, why would I become a member? You know what? It helps pay for the channel, the streaming software, the, you know, like photo editing software, the podcast kind of hosting fees. Like, it's not a money-making operation, Nerds for Humanity, but the membership stuff does help us keep it going. And it also kind of like encourages me to keep creating content since, you know, it is a little bit of a niche channel. By the way, if you are a subscriber, a lot of my content now is via shorts. So follow me on YouTube or TikTok as well. But this long form format is my favorite kind of Nerds for Humanity thing. Philip, I do long form interviews like once every 2-3 weeks. I also have a Substack, so if you miss any of the interviews, like if you have a time zone thing, you can subscribe on my Substack, nerdsforhumanity.substack.com. It's free. And then you can see all of my old interviews, written summary, and the video. And then you can also subscribe to the audio podcast. Oh, Emily is reminding me. Yes, okay. I love it, Emily. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for being a member since the early days and then re-engaging now. This is great. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember that name. I was like, yeah, that's great. Emily has a question. Who is going to run for Democratic President 2028? I'm excited about Pete Buttigieg. I could be convinced to get behind Shapiro, especially if he takes a strong two-state solution position on Israel-Gaza, because I think his public statements have been not super two-state solution. Whitmer, she's okay. I don't know if she's kind of presidential caliber, but, you know, we've got a couple years for her to kind of build out those skills. But I will tell you this, if Elon is serious about creating a third party and he funds it, and unfortunately, as we discussed in America, like money is a requirement to be a capable political party or candidate. As the rules are written today, we don't have that Irish system where they don't allow you to buy an election. But if we had a third party, And that third party was very strategic about picking a few congressional districts and 1 or 2 Senate seats. And that third party were a strong advocate for balanced budgets, sustainable entitlement programs, maybe election reform. Even if it's just those 3 things, like, I could get pretty excited about that. I think it would actually keep the Republicans and the Democrats more on their toes. So, but yeah, in terms of who I'd be excited to see run for the Democratic Party nomination, I'd love to see Pete Buttigieg. I think he's super smart. I think he's capable. He's accomplished. He's not afraid to go on Fox News and kind of challenge some of the talking points. And I also think my sense is that he might be more center left and appeal to more mainstream voters than, let's say, an AOC would. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see who actually runs. I mean, we're counting down the days. I mean, can't believe it's only been, God, 6 months since Trump was sworn in, but it feels longer, right? Don't even get me started about that guy. All right, so closing thoughts. Check out ranked choice voting. If you're in California, I do volunteer work for California Ranked Choice Voting Coalition, CalRCV. If you're not in California, Fair Vote is a really cool organization that you can donate to or volunteer for. I hope you all consider it. And with that, I will say, bye, nerds.